I'm Mark Drumheller here with Matt Freedman and Geoff Ulrich. Super Bowl 59 between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. Excellent game lined up, and we're going to break everything down with our Super Bowl cheat sheet today. We're going to look at the odds, our favorite bets, Matt Freedman's projections, and try and turn them into plus EV props. So really excited about the game. Appreciate everybody riding with us. Matt, I want to start with you. Before we get into the actual game, I know you're our resident Cowboys fans. I'm obviously our resident Eagles fans. I wanted to see, what are the odds you think that by the end of the show we can get a Go Birds out of you?
0. The odds are -0. Yeah.
We're not going to get a Go Birds. Maybe after we watch Saquon run a couple touchdowns during the game, your little Grinch Eagles heart could grow 2 times its size by the end.
Okay, if he runs a couple touchdowns, I will be happy for me and my bankroll, but I will still not be happy for the Eagles.
Probably not going to get a Go Birds.
I'll make up for Freedman's anti-Philly stance here, Mark. Don't worry. I'm a Nick Foles guy from back in the day, so you'll get all the Eagles talk from me on the show.
Absolutely. Sounds great. And guys, we have a ton of great coverage during the week, so make sure you're checking out the website. You can see Matt's projections on the website. Geoff, I know you got a great long shots article. Everybody loves a good long shot, so keep an eye on the website all during the week and make sure that we are staying up to date with all the content. But guys, let's get into the game. I want to start with the spread. Very close spread. Almost a coin flip game. Kansas City Chiefs -1.5 point favorites, -125 on the money line. Eagles +1.5, +105 on the money line. A rematch from Super Bowl we saw 2 years ago that went down to the wire. Matt, I'm going to kick it off to you. Even though I think I have a pretty good idea of where you're going, how do you evaluate this one from an odds perspective?
My projection is very close to this. I have this projected at 2.1. favoring the Chiefs. And so you could say, is there really any edge here? And probably not. That said, it's Patrick Mahomes at less than a field goal, which means there might be some edge. So, I'm betting it. It's the final game of the season. Of course, I'm going to have a bet on the Super Bowl. And looking at this, I would rather take the spread instead of the money line. There's kind of the general guideline. If you like a dog, you take the money line. If it's a short dog, if you like a short favorite, you take the spread. If the favorite wins, it's probably by field goal. It's probably not just by 1 point. So I prefer the -10 odds that we have with the -1.5 versus the -125, -130 odds that you would have to bet for the Chiefs at a pick'em. So I do prefer the Chiefs, and really just Patrick Mahomes. Kind of look at the trends. Patrick Mahomes on a neutral field, 5-0 for his career against the spread. Patrick Mahomes not at home, 37-24-3 against the spread. Mahomes is a favorite of a field goal or less, 15-7 against the spread for his career. Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, 14-6 against the spread. Mahomes versus winning teams, 37-28-2 against the spread. And then of course the hashtag revenge game for Andy Reid. Andy Reid against the Chiefs, 4-1 against the spread. That man does not pull punches going against the team that dumped him stupidly 12 years ago. So I'm going with the Chiefs in this game. Again, the projections say that the market is pretty efficient, but it's the final game of the season. I'm going to have a bet on it, and I do like the Chiefs in this spot.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I mean, the one thing that the Reid-Mahomes combination does is just win. I mean, it almost seems like you can't picture them losing a big game of this magnitude, but I think it might happen. Geoff, I'm going to swing it over to you because I think you're on my side on this one.
Yeah, look, I am on the other side of this, and it's kind of rare for me. I mean, the only time I've bet against the Chiefs over the last 2 years, like in the playoffs, has been in Super Bowl 2023 when I bet the Eagles. But I view this game almost the same as I did that year. And I think I'm just more confident in the Eagles this year, to be honest. I bet them at +110. I'd play them down to +100. They're +105 right now. And like Freedman said, when you got a short underdog like this, I'll just take them on the money line, which is what I did. This does feel like a bit of deja vu, but the thing for me is I think this Eagles team is better than the 2023 team. Their defense is certainly far better. They're third in EPA per play. They're going up against the Chiefs defense that's 15th in EPA per play. I think they have a clear edge there. I think Jalen Carter could wreck this game. You also just look at the offenses. I mean, some stuff was made about the Eagles not being able to pass the ball. I think that was put to bed in the Washington game. And again, 6th in EPA per play versus 9th in EPA per play. I think this Eagles team is just better in most places than the Chiefs. But the reason the Chiefs are the favorite, and maybe for good reason, is the Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid factor. They just win games. So it is a little interesting with this line. I know back in 2023, if I remember correctly, the Eagles actually flipped to favorites before the end of the week, if I'm remembering correctly. This week, they've actually stayed as dogs. The line has pretty much kind of stayed true. It opened at like +2. Now it's +1.5, and it's moved down a bit. But it feels like everyone is now just like, oh, the Chiefs can't lose it all. They're impossible. They're Teflon. Impossible to beat the Chiefs. I don't know. I think this Eagles team is better, and I'm just going to take them at plus money. I think that's the play. Do I feel great about betting as Patrick Mahomes? No, I feel like an idiot, but I do think I'm on the right side.
It does feel like we're kind of outsmarting ourselves. Now, myself, obviously, I'm on the Eagles as well. And it's not just because of my fandom. It's not just the fact that, I'm an Eagles fan and I want us to, parade down Broad Street, after winning a Super Bowl. It's really some key matchups in this game where I think the Eagles hold an advantage. Patrick Mahomes seems invincible, right? If he has the ball at the end of the game, he's going to win. He's going to score. We saw it last time the Eagles played the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. But what the Eagles can do in this matchup against what I think is a very vulnerable Kansas City defense, which, ranks 9th out of the 14 playoff teams in EPA per rush in the playoffs, is keep the ball out of his hands when the game matters most. And they can do that with the running game. They can do that with Saquon Barkley. I like a couple of the key matchups and how the Chiefs defense really is based upon the strength of their secondary and their corners. But, the Eagles have the best man beater in the NFL in A.J. Brown. You can't jam that guy. He's going to throw you in the third row. So I think that there's a lot of things on the field matchups that help. Do they have the coaching advantage? Probably not, right? Vic Fangio is a great coach, but Spags is a great coach as well. And, Andy Reid and, being a play caller obviously has the edge there. But I just think with that running game, if they have the ability to keep the ball out of Kansas City's hands when the game matters most, I think that could be a big factor. I looked at that Bills-Chiefs game in the AFC Championship, and what I thought was interesting is, James Cook only touched the ball on 5 drives for the Bills. They scored 3 touchdowns and a field goal. They're only stopped once on downs. That was when Allen had that fumble in 4th and 1. So, I really think a little bit more of James Cook probably could have went a long way. And I think the Eagles are a team that are going to do that. And, those 4th and 1s are going to be converted when the Eagles are doing it. We know that. That's the best thing that they do is convert 4th and 1. So I took the Eagles here on the money line. I agree with Freedman and the fact that if you're going to take the dog, you might as well just take the money line there. But I think it's going to be a very interesting matchup that's going to come down. It could come down to who has the ball last, and that might just be the Philadelphia Eagles.
Can I
jump in there? You don't agree with me, buddy? Come on.
Yeah, let me jump in really quick. I will say,
Sure.
If it comes down to who has the ball last, I don't really trust Jalen Hurts in this situation to be able to move his team down the field. I do trust Mahomes. And really, I will say, I don't disagree with anything you guys have said. The Eagles certainly have the better roster. I don't think there's any question about that. I would say they have the edge at quarterback. They have the edge at head coach. And in a game this tight, kicking actually matters. And I think they have the edge at kicker. Yeah, and so if you're going to give me those 3 things in a spread of only 1.5, I'm going to take it. But would I be surprised at all if the Eagles win this game? No. They could have won the last Super Bowl that they were in against the Chiefs. They were favored in that game, and this is a better team than that one. So if the Eagles win, it would not at all be a surprise.
But, I mean, I think the main thing is we should be in for a great game, too. I mean, it should be a close game. That last Super Bowl, I think, doesn't get talked about enough. It was probably one of the top 3 Super Bowls ever. I mean, complete back and forth. Chiefs came back from being down a bunch. And like Freeman said, I mean, it came down to the last possession and Mahomes got the ball. Of course, we trust Mahomes a little bit more. It's a great point about the kicker. Jake Elliott is probably the one player on the Eagles who scares me a little bit. But I think I deserve to win that bet back in 2023. If I'm being dead honest, I think the Eagles should have won that game. So I'm going right back to the well. I'm getting my revenge in this spot. I don't care. Like I said, this is the one spot where I was pretty much it was an eventuality that I was going to bet against the Chiefs.
The kicker, definitely an excellent point. I hope it doesn't come down to it. I hope the Eagles are kneeling the ball out at the end. But listen, we got plenty of other bets to get into. But before we do, we're going to talk to our friends over at New Era, and then we're going to come back and we're going to get into Matt's projections.
All right, get ready to witness the 59th battle for the Lombardi Trophy with New Era Cap. The Chiefs and Eagles have claimed their conference titles and they're heading to New Orleans for the ultimate showdown. And whether you're rooting for the AFC or the NFC champions, New Era Cap is the official playoff celebration caps worn by the pros. So gear up for a shot at eternal glory with the official cap of Super Bowl 59.
All right, we're back, and now we're going to talk about Matt's projections this segment. We're going to try and turn those projections into some plus EV props, in this game. And this is part of, one of my favorite parts of really breaking down the game is getting into those matchups and looking at the projections and seeing, hey, where are some inefficiencies in the markets? And, how do we take advantage of those as bettors? So we're going to get into our best projection bet that we saw. And Matt, I'm going to start with you. And you got a Kansas City Chief that you're targeting here.
Yeah, so and I'll just say, kind of starting off here, one of the things that I like to do is look at the projections. I have my own projection set, and then Dwayne McFarland manages the projection set, the official projections for the site. And so you can look at mine, you can look at Dwayne's, and then if you want to aggregate and blend the two of them together, we also have the option for you to do that. So I always enjoy looking at where I am on a player and then seeing where Dwayne is on a player. And if we are both in the same direction on that guy, then I feel really good about the bet, because we have different processes. I tend to sometimes be a little bit lower on projections. Dwayne can sometimes be a little bit higher, and so when I was looking at the projections for Kareem Hunt, I saw that his number in the market was 45.5 rushing yards at DraftKings, but I have him projected at 40, and Dwayne also has him projected exactly at 40. And so that makes me feel really good. Now, Kareem Hunt is the backfield leader. He has overtaken Isaiah Pacheco, but he has been inefficient. The matchup is tough, and the Chiefs' run game has really struggled ever since they moved from left guard to left tackle in Week 14, Joe Thuney, who is an all-pro player, but he is a guard. He is not a tackle. And now with Thuney playing out of position, and then with Mike Caliendo playing at left guard, the left side of that line is not as good as it should be, especially in the running game. So now the interior run game isn't as strong as it was, and their outside run game is still not really that good because they have a guard playing at tackle. And then there's the matchup. The Eagles are number 2 in defensive rush EPA this year. It's just very hard to get going against that defensive line. And so Kareem Hunt, under 45.5 rushing yards at minus 113 at DraftKings. I have this projected at 40. And I think even if Kareem Hunt gets his usual workload, he's just not going to be efficient with that workload. So I do like taking the under in this spot.
I love it. I think that Eagles defense could be the story of the game, but I think in this type of matchup, and correct me if you think I'm wrong here, Freedman, I think we're going to see a lot of different counters and sweeps from Andy Reid and really try and get that Eagles defense going, horizontal from side to side to kind of stretch them out instead of trying to run into that, defensive front.
Yeah, I think that's likely. I would say good luck with that. That Eagles defense is just so hard to run against, even if you're not doing it straight up the middle. I have a lot of respect for the guys in the secondary and their ability to tackle, and then the linebackers as well. Zach Bond there, and then Cooper DeJean as your big slot corner, who I think is a fantastic tackler in the open field. So I think it's going to be hard for the Chiefs to get a lot going in the ground game.
Yep, love that bet for Kareem Hunt. Geoff, let's bring it over to you. What do you got? When you looked at the projections, what stuck out to you?
So yeah, I mean, I'm taking I guess a similar approach in that I'm fading the Kansas City offense a little bit, and just giving a lot of respect to the Eagles defense, which is well deserved. But I'm fading the passing game, which again, Mahomes in a dome, it doesn't sound like the greatest idea, but I do think with Super Bowl props, especially, again, we have one game, everyone's hyper focusing on what do people love to do? Well, they love to bet on the quarterbacks, and I think these passing props for both Mahomes and Hurts are probably just a little bit more inflated than they usually are. So one of the projections that Freedman had on FantasyLife that stuck out to me was Mahomes at 236 passing yards. His total right now is at 252 passing yards. And again, we're talking about an Eagles defense that allowed 184 passing yards per game in the regular season. Now, last 3 games with the playoffs, they've allowed about 245 yards per game. But again, we had Stafford drop over 300 yards on them. That was kind of an anomaly. That's probably inflating that a little bit. So I like the under. I like the under on Patrick Mahomes at 252. I think this number probably even goes up a little bit before game time because, like I said, everyone likes to bet the overs. No one's betting the under on these props. But I think that is the better view to take at this point. We have it projected with a nice edge. It's almost 20 yards. And look, it is scary to kind of fade Mahomes in a dome in these kind of spots. He's obviously like the greatest quarterback in the game, potentially ever, by the time it's all done. But I like playing the projections. I've trusted Freedman's projections all season. It's led to a very profitable season again for me. And I don't have a problem doing it again in the spot. When I see an edge like this, with our projections, I usually just bet it blindly. And I'm kind of okay with doing that with Mahomes' passing total in this spot as well.
Going against the GOAT here against this Eagles secondary. I love it. Attacking Patrick Mahomes, but I do feel like that number is high. So as an Eagles fan, I like to see it. But you brought up some very valid points as far as the Chiefs passing attack and, going up against that Eagles defense. And I kind of piggybacked it on the same way, but I targeted the tight end, Travis Kelce, in my projection bet. I felt like, in this matchup against this Eagles defense, Vic Fangio's defense, very versatile. So I took Travis Kelce under the 61 and a half receiving yards. Projection is at 55 yards. And I think when you look at Kelce, big game, against Pittsburgh, but then he comes back against the Bills, and they really were able to take him out of the game and force KC to find other ways to move the football. And I think the Eagles can do the same thing. They're just so versatile. When you look at their safeties, when you look at the corners, with Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, like bringing those guys into the fold has really made them really diverse in the secondary. So I think they can add some people to kind of take out Kelce and force Mahomes, to look at your Xavier Worthies, maybe even your Hollywood Brown. I know we got an article on the site right now that talks about how he might be the X factor in this game. And I really think that Reed's going to have to get creative from a play calling perspective in order to get those guys involved. So I think that the Travis Kelce under makes a lot of sense here. I know it's a big game, and I know in big games, big-time quarterbacks gravitate towards their best weapon, but I think the Eagles are going to be all over Kelce and really try and force, Mahomes to win other ways. And I think they're athletic enough on defense to where they can do that. What are your thoughts on that one, guys?
I mean, I think it's really tough to shut down Travis Kelce in the playoffs. I'm going to talk about him in a bit here, but again, it's a pretty big total. It's over 60 yards. He's certainly gone under that a ton during this season. I think if the Eagles shut down Travis Kelce, they're probably winning this game and potentially handily. So it kind of depends how you see the game going.
I have a lot of respect for Cooper DeJean, and I think he will be matched up against Kelce for a significant chunk of the game, because we do see with Noah Gray on the field, we do see the Chiefs run a decent number of 2 tight end sets, but I think the Chiefs will be going against a defense that is probably still a nickel, because DeJean is a big guy, so he can kind of play a little bit as a corner, a little bit as a safety, a little bit even kind of as a linebacker if they need him to. And so if there are 2 tight ends on the field, I think DeJean is going against Kelce for a decent chunk of that time. And I think as great as Kelce is, I think DeJean is a really great player who is still a rookie. He's still coming into his own, still emerging. I have the projection for the under at 55 yards. My projections always tend to skew a little bit towards the under here, just human wet blanket that I am. But I don't I don't hate this bet. I think it's sort of like a barbell approach where like a wide range of outcomes. I feel like it's either a Kelsey game where he has like 100 yards and you could maybe do ladders and sort of, escalate, or I think they shut him down and it's like Travis Kelsey has 14 yards. I think it's one or the other.
Now, Matt, when you say that your projections typically lean towards the under in this type of game, is that in general or is that just for the Super Bowl? Because like one of the things that I kind of think about, when I look at the market and see some of these, overinflated props is like, do you think there's a little bit, like they inflate them a little bit just because they know that the public is going to gravitate towards some of these overs?
That's a great question. Yes. I think for the Super Bowl especially, and you could also say for more of the high profile games, whether it's a primetime game or whether it's a playoff game, I think you do see the player prop numbers maybe inflate just a little bit. And I don't think it's, like inflate 10 yards. It's probably more like, 3 to 8 yards, something like that. But 5 is sort of like maybe the inflation on your more popular players. But in general, regardless of whether it's a high profile game or not, unders historically have been the more profitable side. And, hopefully my projections are accurate. And if they are accurate, then that would mean that they would tend to be on the under more than the over. So that's why just in general, you see my projections skew towards the under. But then specifically in games where the numbers might be a little more inflated because you have more people betting into them, people tend to want to bet on things to happen instead of watching a boring game like we had with the Patriots and the Rams in the Super Bowl years ago. That was the dream fest for me. It was all unders hitting. People don't want to see that kind of game. They want to bet on stuff to happen, which means the numbers get inflated. So I think for games like this, especially, my numbers all the more tend to go to the under.
Yeah, I think that one finished 13-3, had Sean McVay breaking out the tequila in Cabo to fix the quarterback position. But, definitely one of the most odd Super Bowls, not a lot of action. I don't think we're going to have that problem, in this one. I think we're going to see plenty of points. But excellent point about just how sometimes you have to handicap the Super Bowl a little bit differently than you would an average game. But let's pivot over now. I want to talk about our instinct bets. We're going to talk about like when we saw this matchup, me personally, I was not surprised to see these two teams advance, but once they did, you start digging right away. I think after the AFC Championship, our minds start to kind of swing right into mode of like, hey, this is the matchup. We got 2 weeks to break it down. What do we like in this matchup? Geoff, I'm going to start with you on this one. When you saw that this was the matchup, you opened up DraftKings Sportsbook. What popped out at you first immediately?
Yeah, so look, whenever the Super Bowl gets set, the first thing I do, obviously you look at the line, but then I look at the MVP mark and I see if there's any opportunity there that I really like. Say I like a team, maybe I'll take their quarterback in the MVP market alongside it or just as a better way to play it, in my opinion. But what I did this season, if I'm being honest, the first bet I made was the Eagles, but I've already talked about the Eagles. So the very second bet, and the bet I made almost alongside it, was Travis Kelsey to win MVP around plus 1,600, plus 1,800. And I just love this one for so many reasons. A, it gives me a great hedge against the Eagles. If my Eagles bet loses and Kelsey wins MVP, I still win. But, again, I do think Travis Kelsey MVP makes a ton of sense in the spot for a ton of reasons. Maybe it is a little bit of a tough matchup. We just finished talking about him, but I love the fact that Freedman brought this up. I think it's an all or nothing thing with Travis Kelsey. It's either he's like Dijon shuts him down, the Eagles defense dominates, Kelsey goes for like 2 catches, or it's just like Travis Kelsey legitimately might catch 12 passes. Because look what we saw last week with Zach Ertz, and even the week before with Tyler Higbee. This Eagles defense did just sort of push action towards the middle, allow a ton of receptions to opposing tight ends. So when you look at the historic sort of profiles of MVP winners over the last 12 years, we've had 2 wide receivers win it. Cooper Kupp, 8 receptions, 92 yards, 2 touchdowns. Julian Edelman, 10 receptions, 141 yards, and a touchdown. Travis Kelsey just put up a line like that 2 games ago against the Texans. If anyone on the Chiefs is putting up a receiving line like that, it's Travis Kelsey. And just to finish off here, Kelsey was plus 1,200 to win MVP last year against the 49ers. He's plus 1,800 this season. I'd argue this is probably a way better matchup for him, to be honest. And I think that his odds probably are just a little bit inflated this year, maybe just because people think he's a little bit older. I think there's probably going to be a little bit of MVP Mahomes fatigue as well. So if we do get the Chiefs win, if Kelce does have a pretty solid game, I think there's a very good chance we see Kelce win that MVP award. I really like that bet anyways. Like I said, just like the odds, especially just compared to last year. So.
Yeah, definitely love that. And I do agree with you. I feel like the national sentiment is that there is a little bit of fatigue with Patrick Mahomes, and they talk about the flopping, it's an issue. And I feel like we got a rough call from the refs in the last Super Bowl when they played the Chiefs. I didn't like the call, obviously, at the end being an Eagles fan, but I don't in general typically like when the game feels like it's being blamed on the refs or whatnot. Like the players played a game for 60 minutes. There's obviously things they can do, but it does feel like nationally, like, Matt, if the Philadelphia Eagles are coming out likable in this matchup, like there has to be a little bit of fatigue with the Chiefs, right?
Yeah, probably. I will say it's basically Cowboys fans and Chiefs fans who are rooting for the Chiefs this week. So yeah, I see Geoff's bet. I will say I am definitely not one to poo-poo anyone's Super Bowl MVP bets, because I'm the guy who multiple times has bet on a kicker to win Super Bowl MVP. Newsflash, it hasn't happened. So I will say I can't say that Geoff is wrong. I will say I do not think anyone on the Chiefs outside of Patrick Mahomes is winning this award, though. Like, if Damian Williams didn't win it years ago against the 49ers when he had like 150 scrimmage yards and 2 touchdowns, one of which was like the backbreaker in that game, I don't think anyone on the Chiefs ever wins it outside of Mahomes, unless Mahomes outright has a bad game. And it is like what Geoff said, like a Julian Edelman situation where someone on the Chiefs, probably Kelce if it does happen, but someone on the Chiefs has like over 50% of the receiving yards for the team. In that situation, sure. But even then, I think we have a situation where it's like Patrick Mahomes has 180 yards and 3 touchdowns and he wins Super Bowl MVP. So yeah, that's the way I would look at Geoff's bet.
You're completely forgetting to factor in Taylor Swift and her influence in all this, but okay.
You're true. You're accurate on that.
We left Taylor out of it. But yeah. Matt, what was your instinct bet when you saw the matchup with the Eagles and the Chiefs?
Yeah, we don't really need to talk about my instinct bet a lot. I talked about it at the top, but it's Chiefs. It's Chiefs -1.5. It's just, if you give me Patrick Mahomes in a playoff game, anything less than a field goal, I'm just like a gunslinger in the Wild West. I'm just going to be drawing as quickly as I can on that. And to Geoff's point, if you're looking at the Super Bowl MVP market, thinking maybe I just bet Patrick Mahomes, you can get him at +105, +10 to be the Super Bowl MVP. And that might be the way to go instead of betting on the Chiefs at -1.5. So either one of those bets, I think, could be like basically an automatic instinct type of bet. So for me, Chiefs at -1.5, I don't want to say it's a no-brainer, but like, it's just, for me, like an instinct bet. Basically, until Mahomes has a string of games where he proves you can no longer count on him to win as a short favorite, I think I'm probably just betting him as a short favorite.
Well, I'm glad you didn't say it was a no-brainer, because that would mean that I'm brainless, right? Because I'm on the other side. My instinct bet was the Eagles on the money line. And for the reasons I discussed earlier, we talked about it. But also there's a different layer that I wanted to touch on, is that I do have Kansas City futures. I did bet +600 after last Super Bowl because I thought nobody could beat Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, and I'm just going to keep betting them until they lose the Super Bowl. And plus, I know this one might make Matt cringe a little bit, but I do have Kansas City as the final leg of a 96-1 parlay that involved the Celtics and the UConn being champions as well. So Matt just kind of giggles. He kind of looks at me like Logan Roy would look at his kids in Succession, like, you can't survive this way if you you keep doing it. But, I do have the 96-1. So it was a little bit of a hedge going in hard on the Eagles, but also I'm not going to be parading down Broad Street after the Eagles win and not getting anything out of it, losing all my Kansas City futures. So I had to double down on the Eagles here. So a lot of fun with the instinct bets, guys. We got plenty more. We're going to give you our favorite prop bets when we return. But right now, we're going to get a brief word from our friends from Bud Light.
Sunday. Time to suit up.
This is like half zips, kind of quarter zip.
And sacrifice your body.
This is fun.
Because no matter how hard you football, it's easy to Sunday.
All right, guys, we are back. And now we're going to talk about our favorite prop bets. And we broke them down in this segment into 3 categories: $5 bet, $20 bet, and $100 bet. We each picked one, so you're going to get 3 prop bets from each of us here. And I'm going to kick things off with you, Geoff. We're going to start small, and then we're going to work our way big. What was your $5 bet?
Well, look, I mean, I took this $5 bet as an opportunity just to throw $5 into the wind and light it on fire, I guess, because, I mean, if you thought my Travis Kelce MVP bet was crazy, like, buckle up. No tight end has ever won the MVP award, so why not bet both tight ends to win the MVP? Dallas Goedert is plus 12,000 to win MVP on DraftKings. And you know what? I mean, he's probably a little bit too big. He probably should be a little bit smaller than this. I think there's a tiny bit of value, just a tiny bit. Dallas Goedert last 3 games, target share 35%, 20%, 33%. He's actually basically in line with A.J. Brown in terms of target share. So he's getting a ton of usage. He's going to have the most advantageous matchup on the field. The Chiefs allowed 5.9 receptions, 66 receiving yards per game to opposing tight ends. So they were bottom 3 against opposing tight ends. And look, you want a little bit of just history? Dallas Goedert went for 170 yards in the Superdome in New Orleans in week 3. So I don't know. Plus 12,000. Again, I'm just lighting things on fire here, but $5, let's do it. And I'm also going to throw in a Goddard anytime touchdown just to be, just to hedge a little bit in case he gets in and doesn't win the MVP, which he's not going to, by the way. He's not going to win MVP, where I'm still going to bet it. I am going to bet Dallas Goedert anytime touchdown. He's plus 300 there on DraftKings. In all seriousness, it is a great matchup for Goddard, and it would not shock me if he led the Eagles in receiving. Will it be enough to get him the MVP award? Probably not, but I'm going to bet on it anyways.
Go Birds. The only Dallas you'll see in the Super Bowl, Dallas Goedert. Matt, I'm going to kick it over to you now. And what was your $5 bet?
First, I want to comment quickly on Jeff's bet here. I will say that I commend Geoff. I do think that Goddard's MVP odds should be in the same range as Devontae Smith, right? And Smith is around like 50-1, 66-1 in that range. So I do think that Goddard is a smidgen undervalued. That said, we're talking about like the difference between this is 0.5% likely to happen and 1% likely to happen. So there's an edge. There's definitely an edge there. I just still think we are we're burning money. But on the topic of burning money, I'm looking at a guy to score 2 touchdowns, and that is Saquon Barkley. Now, look, it's not exactly burning money, right? But it is longer odds. It's plus 330 at DraftKings. And Saquon Barkley, the way I kind of reached this was I think he's been underpriced in the anytime touchdown market all year. And he's minus 190 at DraftKings in that market. I have my projections at minus 239. So if I think he's undervalued to score a touchdown in general, that probably means he's undervalued to score multiple times. So instead of laying minus 190, I ratchet it up a little bit and I get the plus 330 odds. And in 19 games this year, he scored 20 touchdowns. In 8 games, he scored 2 touchdowns, or at least 2 touchdowns. So 42.1% of the time in a game he has played this year, he has scored multiple touchdowns. And, the implied probability, if you look at the odds of plus 330, you can go to the calculator, the odds calculator that we have at FantasyLife. And this is like around 20 something percent. Let me actually just type it in here. 23.3% is the implied probability. But given that he's hit this number in 42.1% of his games, I think there's some value here. And the matchup isn't great, but he can score as a runner and as a receiver. Like he's on the field every down. He has multiple outs for hitting this. So 2+ touchdowns for Saquon Barkley at plus 330 odds at DraftKings. That is the $5 bronze bet that I would make.
Would love to see it. Would love to see Saquon get 2 touchdowns, but it makes a lot of sense. And those odds plus 330, very good. And I'm going to kind of touch on that a little bit, Matt, as I go into my $5 bet. I did the same thing, multiple touchdowns, but I did it with Jalen Hurts. And my reason being is that I think, number one, you get the touchdowns with Hurts with the tush push. They get down to the 1 yard line. I mean, they could probably do it twice from the 2, 3 times from the 3 if they wanted to against this Kansas City defensive front. But the other factor, which I think is more important, is we know Hurts has been banged up towards the second half of the season. They're just going to let him go. They're going to let him go in this matchup. And I think the Eagles running game versus the Kansas City defense is really going to force Spagnuolo to do a lot of run blitzes. They can't just play them straight up. And I think there's a lot of high variance with that. So I think you could see a lot of explosive running plays from not only Hurts, from Barkley. So at plus 550 odds, I thought $5, this is worth a stab with Jalen Hurts. And also, DraftKings has a combined market that you can do. You know, if you like my bet, you like Freedman's bet, you could get 3+ touchdowns from Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts. So you combine them for 3+, and that comes in around plus 215. So you can get the best of both worlds. You can get little Matt Freedman, little Mark Drumheller, and, plus 215. No, not going to get the payout, but you only need 3 touchdowns total. So I thought that was a pretty interesting market, interesting way to attack it.
Yeah, and
you guys
I mean,
are going to be
I
sad
think the odds
when Dallas Goedert goes for 3 touchdowns and scores the only touchdowns of the game, and none of your bets hit.
and they're all rushing touchdowns. Amazingly, all rushing touchdowns for Dallas Goedert. That's how he wins MVP. All rushing touchdowns. Hurts gets no credit. No one else finds the end zone.
He'll do the
Amazing
tush push. They just do it with Goddard. That's the wrinkle.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I like that. And I would say Mark, to your point, I think the odds of both Hurts and Saquon scoring touchdowns, pretty decent. You know, I'll talk about Hurts a little bit more later, but yeah, I like the bet there.
Let's get into the $20 bets now. This is our second tier, the ones we like a little bit more. We're going to risk a little bit more. My man Geoff going back to the Eagles. I love it. Why don't you hit us with it?
Yeah, this one is a far more sane bet. It's kind of like the $20 bet I'm going to use to win back my money on the first bet. Devonta Smith under 4.5 receptions, minus 109 on DraftKings. So the odds are actually slightly in our favor versus the standard minus 110 lines like that. Again, I talked about Goddard's target share going up. What's kind of been at the expense of Devonta Smith. Target share over the last 3 games, 24%, 20%, 17%. He's actually only seen 4 targets in each of the Eagles' 3 playoff games. So he has caught all 4 passes in all of those games. It's been a very efficient playoffs for Devonta Smith, but he's just not getting that primary targeting anymore. Obviously, A.J. Brown is still a factor. And with Goddard sort of just being used more, he's kind of just turned into the third wheel. He's gone under 4.5 receptions in 7 of his last 10 games. And, you just look at how this game could break down, how the Eagles could win. Saquon Barkley could run all over the yard. The defense could take over, and Jalen Hurts could pass the ball like 19 times in this game. I just think there's so many outs for Devonta Smith to go under this 4.45 reception total that it just really makes sense. Again, nothing against the player. Love Devonta Smith. He's just in a situation where I think the Eagles have really started to work in Goddard more. Goddard's playing well, and I think it's going to hurt his volume again in the Super Bowl. Would be pretty shocked if he saw more than 6 targets, unless we got some kind of crazy game at the end, which could happen. There's obviously ways Devonta Smith can go over this, but really like the under here with Smith at 4.5.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I think that especially the point is that they're getting Goddard more involved in the offense. And I think when you look at Kansas City's corners, I think it's going to be a little tough for Devonta Smith. I think A.J. Brown's going to have a much easier time. I will be interested to see how Spagnuolo attacks this, one of the best defensive minds in the game. Just accounting for bodies in the box for the running game and then trying to match up with those receivers. So lots of fun. Matt, what did you have for your $20 bet for the Super Bowl?
All right. Unfortunately, I'm going under on Patrick Mahomes, 30.5 rushing yards, minus 110 at DraftKings. And I have this projected at 24.7. Now, I will say, it's the playoffs, right? And quarterbacks, especially Mahomes, they tend to run a little bit more in the playoffs. So even if you assume that Mahomes runs more, you can still look and say, hey, he had only 14 yards rushing in the divisional round. If you look at all of the games he had this season, he went over this number just 4 times. And then there's the wrinkle of going against the Eagles defense specifically. Just 2 players against the Eagles went over this number this year. Jaden Daniels, who did it twice, and Lamar Jackson. Those are probably the 2 best running quarterbacks in the league. And Mahomes is, I think, a very underappreciated scrambler, especially in the playoffs when he is a little more willing. And then also in the playoffs, we have seen, not often, but we have seen the Chiefs use Mahomes in designed running plays. So maybe we see that a little bit more in this game. But still, 30.5 is a big number for a guy who isn't one of the best runners in the league, going against a team that hasn't allowed anyone to hit this number unless they are one of the best runners in the league. So I hate going against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs and like betting his unders, especially as a runner. But I think 30.5 is too high. I think this number should probably, again, I have the projection at 24.7. If this number were 26.5, 27.5, I probably wouldn't be betting it. But 30.5 is just too high.
Yeah, I love that one, Matt, because you're seeing a lot of Patrick Mahomes, uses his wheels in big games, and there's a lot of, I feel like, narrative to the over, but I think that we talked about it earlier, how some of these numbers get inflated, and I think this rushing yard total for Mahomes, definitely one of them.
I do think the matchup here matters too. Like, I think it's a great point to bring up the Eagles defense. Unless they've been up against an elite runner, it's been really tough. So I feel like that's a really big number for Mahomes historically too, like probably right at the top of his sort of historic prop number. So yeah, I like that one. I'm not gonna lie, I'm probably gonna add this one as well, just and take credit for it as well. So.
When it hits, just hit social media faster than Matt after it hits. Like, oh, you heard this one on the Fantasy Life show.
Yeah, that's right.
There you go. But so for my $20 bet, I'm going to go with Saquon Barkley here, and I alluded a little bit to this earlier just about how I feel like Kansas City is going to have to run blitz and take some chances against this Eagles running game. So I'm going to play Saquon Barkley longest rush over 25.5 yards. So we've seen the highlights of Saquon Barkley breaking off 60, 70-yard touchdowns. He's only went over this number in half his games this year, 10 out of 20 for the total season. So it's not like an automatic thing. You would think by watching the highlights, he's definitely going to do it. But again, I think this is matchup oriented. I think that Kansas City is a team that wants to rely on their corners, wants to rely on their secondary, and they're going to take chances in trying to run blitz and take out Barkley, and that's going to lead to explosive plays. That type of, there's times where he's going to guess right. He's going to get him in the backfield. There's times where he's not going to guess right, and Saquon Barkley is going to be running down the sidelines, and we're going to cash our bet at over 25.5 yards. So for me, again, Saquon, one of the most dynamic running backs in the NFL, can rip off these big chunk plays. It feels like at will with this Eagles offensive line. So I just think this is typically a random prop that I don't bet into. But in this matchup with Saquon Barkley, I think it makes sense. What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
Yeah, I like it. And one of the drawbacks of Barkley, or if there's ever been any criticism of Barkley, it's that he can be something of a boom bust runner, where he has stretches at a time where he's maybe picking up 1 or 2 yards, but the offense isn't really doing much when it's running through Barkley, and then bam, he breaks off a 50-yarder. And so Barkley, as this kind of volatile runner, and he's improved this year in his consistency, and I think a big part of that is having a run-based offense that has a great offensive line in front of him. So he's become more consistent this year, but he's still, I think at his core, a sort of boom-bust guy that has that volatility to rip off a long run every 5-10 carries. And so 25.5 yards, I think, is well within the range of outcomes for Saquon Barkley. So I do like that, especially if you in a single game parlay. If you correlate this with Barkley scoring a touchdown, right? I think if Barkley has a run that goes over 25.5 yards, he could easily have a run that goes for 50 yards and a touchdown, right? Like for him, it's just, does he get to that third level? And if he does, no one might catch him. So I do like this bet, especially if you're putting it alongside Barkley to score a touchdown.
Yeah, excellent point in rolling it into the same game parlay. And there's a lot, and you could also add in like his rushing yards to that as well. You know, kind of, you don't have to go over. You can go kind of under the rushing yards just to give it a little bit of a boost. So that makes a ton of sense. Now let's get into the big bets, fellas. $100 bets. This is the ones that we truly believe in. I'm going to start things off here, and I'm going to stay on the Saquon Barkley train. Go Birds. I think you should bet everything Saquon Barkley. To be honest, after they reunite the country by taking down the Chiefs in the three-peat, I want to see DraftKings roll out some Saquon Barkley to win the 2028 election odds. But for the Super Bowl, I just bet Super Bowl MVP. Now, DraftKings has another market, too, where you can bet the position, and you can bet running back. It's like plus 225, but you should be able to get Saquon around plus 240. And I think that there really isn't a bigger path to the quarterback with the Eagles, Jalen Hurts, winning the MVP than there is with Barkley. And even though if he puts up the numbers, I feel like nationally, they fell in love with the narrative that Saquon comes to Philadelphia and he has these explosive plays. He's the guys ripping off the long chunk plays. He's the ones that making the highlights, making snow angels in the end zone. And he's that guy. So, and again, when from a game script perspective, and I think this is really important, any iteration where the Eagles win probably is married to Saquon Barkley running out the clock at the end of the game and Patrick Mahomes sitting on the sidelines not having a chance to win the game. And if that's the case, that's going to be the lasting image. Like the Eagles won the Super Bowl because Saquon Barkley put the game away. And I think that's going to be big. So at these odds, plus 240, even if you just want to play the running back position, to give you the Kansas City guys a plus 225, I think this makes a ton of sense. I think that Hurts is a great quarterback, but I don't think there's a big path for him to get MVP. Even if he has a big game, if Barkley's right in that range, I think the narrative is you have people voting for Barkley.
I would love to hear Geoff's thoughts on this. Like my quick thoughts are that like MVP typically goes to a quarterback. I know Barkley almost certainly finished ahead in MVP voting of Hurts this year, but like, okay, Saquon Barkley, great. He's a running back. Running backs don't matter. Jalen Hurts, whether people want to admit it or not, is still the most important offensive player on the Eagles. And I think if the Eagles win, it's going to have to do more because of him than Barkley. But that doesn't mean that AP voters are going to go in that direction. So, Geoff, do you have thoughts on Barkley versus Hurts? Because I have struggled with this one in thinking about this market for at least a week. And honestly, in anticipating that this would be the matchup in the Super Bowl, I've been thinking about this basically since the playoffs started.
Yeah, no, I would probably rather just bet Saquon's alternate lines or something, or like 2 touchdowns, than bet him MVP, because I think Barkley can obviously get there, but I think he needs some sort of splash play. Like he needs like a 60-yard touchdown to open the game, and potentially another one, because he needs something voters are going to remember. If he just grinds out like 100 yards and a couple touchdowns and they win, like I don't know. Jalen Hurts is the guy touching the ball. There is possible also just a little bit of redemption here for Jalen Hurts, who would have been the MVP in that other Super Bowl. So yeah, it's tough. I understand where the odds are, but I would rather take Hurts as well, to be honest. I'd rather take the QB on the Eagles. But I do it's not that I don't think Saquon can get there. I would just probably rather get exposure to him in like alternate lines or longest rush, whatever you're kind of betting, than necessarily MVP. That's kind of my take. I would lean Hurts as well at the current odds.
And my thought process is if you're going to bet Hurts to win MVP, might as well just bet the multiple touchdown to plus 550 that I discussed earlier. But, it's an interesting dynamic between Hurts and Barkley's relationship with the Eagles offense. But I like Barkley for MVP. If they win, I'm going to be happy. Let's not lie. Matt, what's your $100 bet?
All right. Well, on the topic of Jalen Hurts, I'm going the wimpiest possible way and just saying, hey, I think this guy scores a touchdown. Jalen Hurts anytime touchdown -110 at DraftKings. So this is basically an over/under of 0.5, and I have this projected at 0.73. -165 is my projection for Jalen Hurts to score. So -165 versus the -110 that's in the market. I think there's some value there. 18 games this year Jalen Hurts has played. He's had 18 rushing touchdowns. So the math kind of maths right there. Touchdowns in 12 of 18 games is 66.7% hit rate, -110 odds. The implied probability is 52.4%. So you compare that to the 66.7% hit rate he's had this year. And I will say there's room for both Hurts and Barkley in this game to get touchdowns because it's a decently sized total, and the Eagles are a run-heavy team. So I think both Hurts and Barkley can get there on the ground as scorers. So Jalen Hurts, anytime touchdown, -110 at DraftKings.
Love it. Go Birds. Geoff, take us home with your $100 bet.
Oh, as if I haven't mentioned enough, weird receiving bets and stuff like that. I'm going to go Juju Smith-Schuster over 1.5 receptions, -120 on DraftKings. I don't know, man. I mean, if you look at, I'm just trying to pick out which receiver I like the most here on the Chiefs, but Juju played 58% of the snaps in his last game. His route rate went up to 63%. He's the primary slot receiver. I think considering how well the Eagles play on the outside, it wouldn't shock me to see him, just get pushed a little bit more towards the middle. And it's such a low line. We need 2 receptions. Obviously went over that against the Bills. And look, Smith-Schuster, 7 catches, 53 yards versus the Eagles in the 2023 Super Bowl. I like laddering this as well on DraftKings. You can get 3+ receptions, +247, 4+ +670, and 5+ 1760. I'm going to ladder my $100 across all those Juju Smith-Schuster milestone bets. And, just pray that they're just targeting him over the middle to start the game.
Hope and pray it's going to come home. Between the Juju Smith-Schuster ladder and Dallas Goedert MVP, I'm going to be hitting up Geoff for some drinks because I know he's going to have some extra money to spend after taking those bets home. But guys, had a ton of fun breaking down Super Bowl 59, Eagles and Chiefs. Can't wait. We appreciate everybody riding with us today. Make sure you check out all the amazing content on the site over at FantasyLife.com coming your way this week. I'm Mark Drumheller for Matt, for Geoff, and our incredible producers. We'll see you next time on the Fantasy Life Show.